You were never meant to stay. Just a stand-in until Daniel came back. Margaret said it with a smile, the kind of smile that could cut through flesh if it tried any harder. 3 years of marriage, and on their anniversary, she dragged that sentence out like a knife across a velvet tablecloth, clean, dramatic, cruel. Robert didn't flinch. He stood in the middle of the marble-floored foyer of their mansion, buttoned up in the same suit she had picked out for him during their first public appearance together. She had chosen it for the photos. For the press. Not for him. And now, standing right beside her, was the reason he had existed in this house at all. Daniel. The man who once disappeared without a trace, now returned like a bad sequel. Chiseled jaw, slicked back hair, skin tone 2 shades lighter than his neck. He looked like a mannequin from an overpriced fashion brand. And he knew it. You poor substitute, Daniel muttered as he walked up, closing the space between them with a smirk. She really downgraded for 3 years, didn't she? He leaned in, finger pointed at Robert's chest like he was pressing an elevator button. No money. No charm. Just some placeholder to keep her warm. A few of Margaret's distant relatives chuckled. Her mother raised a champagne flute but didn't drink. Her father looked away, embarrassed. The staff? They stood silently. Trained to ignore humiliation when it happened in real time. Robert looked down at the finger in his chest, then up into Daniel's face. He smiled. I've been waiting for this day. Daniel blinked. My phone's on 24/7, Robert continued. Margaret, if you want to go ahead and file the papers, I'll sign before dessert's served. The room fell so silent, you could hear the ice shift in someone's untouched glass. What? Margaret's voice cracked just slightly. You heard me, Robert said with a light laugh, brushing Daniel's finger away like lint. I'm not angry. I'm free. He turned toward the double doors like he might leave right then and there. But then, a hand slid around his elbow. Small, warm fingers curled against his jacket sleeve, grounding him. He turned to see Melissa, Margaret's younger sister, stepping into the silence like it belonged to her. Then how about you become mine? Gasps. Audible ones. Margaret's face stiffened as if she'd been slapped. Daniel's eyebrows shot up, the confidence slipping from his face for the first time that evening. Robert looked down at Melissa. She was still wearing the soft pink dress from dinner, the hem brushing against her ankles. Her eyes didn't waver, and there was a quiet mischief glowing just beneath her steady expression. Melissa, Margaret snapped. Don't joke. I'm not joking, she said smoothly, not even glancing back. If you're letting him go, I'm calling dibs. The moment was surreal. In a room full of designer glassware, pre-cut steaks, and pretentious laughter, the only thing that felt real was the girl standing beside him. The one person who, in 3 years, had ever asked him if he was doing okay. Robert chuckled softly, looking forward again. I'm not begging, Margaret. I'm not breaking down. And I'm definitely not fighting you for someone like him. He nodded toward Daniel without even looking at him. You made your choice. Just make sure you don't choke on it. He slipped his hand into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and tapped the screen. Call my lawyer. Let's begin. And just before the doors opened, he added, almost as an afterthought, you'll find I've already drafted the exit terms. I hope Daniel's ready to match them. And then he was gone. 3 years ago, Margaret Thompson walked into Robert's life not with love, but with a proposal, a literal one. She didn't ask him to marry her out of affection. She offered him a contract. A neat 3-year agreement. He would pose as her devoted husband to shield her from relentless matchmaking attempts by board members and high society families trying to merge wealth through marriage. In return? A clean $10 million payout and the deed to a luxury penthouse in the heart of the city. Robert didn't hesitate. He read every line of the contract, memorized every clause, and shook her hand the same way he closed every business deal, firm, emotionless, final. He was a man who kept his promises. And for 3 years, he became the image of the perfect husband. He never once missed a dinner, even when she did. He stood beside her at charity events, whispered memorized compliments at the galas, and always knew which side her hair was parted on for the cameras. When she had stomach issues, which happened often, he cooked for her with the kind of care most men reserved for anniversary dinners. Low-spice vegetable broths. Soothing herbal teas. He even kept track of her menstrual cycle, logging it in a private app, adjusting her diet accordingly, making sure there were warm pads in the car and ginger chews in the bedside drawer. He ironed his own shirts. He kept every room spotless without ever asking the staff for help. He responded to emails at 4 a.m., smiled politely to Margaret's critics in meetings, and never once made a scene, even when she forgot his birthday 2 years in a row. To her family, Robert was polite. To her board, professional. To the media, perfect. To himself? A ghost. A placeholder. A countdown. On his private phone, there was a calendar widget that showed the days remaining on the contract. Every morning, it ticked down. Every evening, he looked at it like a man in solitary confinement scratching notches on the wall. And then there was Melissa. Back when they first met, Melissa was a storm packed into the body of a teenage girl. Wild, impulsive, always sneaking out to nightclubs with fake IDs and dyed hair. Margaret referred to her as the family embarrassment and often snapped at Robert to stay away from her nonsense. But Robert didn't see nonsense. He saw pain. Rebellion. Someone screaming to be heard in a house that only spoke in press releases. It started with midnight conversations. She'd stumble into the kitchen while he was boiling broth for Margaret. She'd sit on the marble island in her oversized hoodie, sipping his tea without asking. "You don't talk much," she once said. "I talk when it matters," he replied. She liked that. Sometimes they'd sit in silence, and she'd scroll on her phone while he stirred. Other times, she'd ask about the stocks he was watching or the books he was reading. Slowly, the chaos faded from her. The hair dye disappeared. The eyeliner softened. She traded nightclub wristbands for sketchbooks and learned how to paint silence without words. And Robert watched her grow. He never touched her. Never let a single thought stray. But there was a moment once, brief and forgotten, when she fell asleep on the couch beside him, her head on his shoulder, and the weight of her felt like something he wasn't allowed to carry. So he stood and left. Melissa never mentioned it. But after that night, her eyes changed when she looked at him. She didn't flirt. She waited. By the second year of the contract, Margaret stopped coming home altogether. Her affairs were quiet, discreet, international. But Robert never reacted. Not once. He was playing the long game. Every public outing. Every smile for the camera. Every time he served Margaret soup at the boardroom when she was too sick to speak, it was all recorded. Documented. Strategically filed. And Melissa? She noticed. She started bringing him coffee during late nights at the home office. She'd sneak his favorite snacks into his desk drawer. She laughed at his deadpan sarcasm, even when he wasn't trying to be funny. When he got the flu one winter, Margaret was in Paris. Melissa spent 2 days nursing him back to health, reading to him from a book she'd written under a pen name. She never said a word about it afterward. He never forgot. Still, he counted the days. The closer the countdown came to 0, the colder he became. Emotionally starved but disciplined. Melissa grew more bold. He grew more distant. It wasn't until 2 weeks before the contract's end that she finally cornered him in the library. "Do you hate being here?" she asked. He didn't look up from the page he was reading. "Hate is a waste of time." She moved closer. "You don't hate her for using you?" "I agreed to be used." She paused, biting her lip. "And what happens when the contract ends?" He closed the book, eyes finally lifting to meet hers. "I vanish." And then, without another word, he stood and walked past her, his shoulder brushing hers for the first time. From that moment, she knew. Robert wasn't hers yet. But when the clock hit 0, she would fight for him with everything she had. The dining room was set for 30 golden candles. Custom name cards. A centerpiece imported from Florence. It was the kind of anniversary dinner that looked more like a diplomatic event than a celebration of love. Robert arrived precisely on time. Not a minute early. Not a second late. Margaret, of course, wasn't there yet. Her seat was empty, as usual. The waiters poured champagne. Her father made a stiff welcome speech about partnership and reputation. Robert raised his glass with practiced ease, nodding in all the right places. The words rolled off everyone's ears like corporate press copy. Then the doors opened. Margaret walked in, wrapped in a pale blue designer gown that shimmered under the chandeliers. She looked like a woman arriving at a film premiere. But it wasn't her dress that turned heads. It was the man walking beside her. Daniel. He wore a velvet blazer and a smug smile like it was part of his skin. His hand settled possessively on the small of her back as they walked in step down the center aisle between the tables. Whispers flared like wildfire. Robert didn't move. Margaret's heels clicked sharply as she stopped beside him. Her voice was syrup-laced poison. Everyone, thank you for coming to celebrate 3 years of a very strategic alliance. She turned to Daniel. This is Daniel. The man I've always loved. Robert looked at her, then at Daniel. His expression didn't flicker. Daniel chuckled as if it were all a joke he'd been waiting to tell. Must have been rough holding my spot all these years, buddy. He leaned in closer, his cologne suffocating. But the real man's back now. You can go. Margaret's father cleared his throat, horrified but silent. Her mother clutched her pearls and whispered something to a cousin. The board members were frozen. No one knew where to look. Robert tilted his head and smiled gently. I've been waiting for this day. Daniel raised an eyebrow. My phone's on all night, Robert said casually, setting his champagne down. Margaret, if you're ready to proceed, I'm free for a divorce any time. A fork clattered to the floor somewhere near the back. One of the waiters gasped. Margaret blinked. She hadn't prepared for this version of the script. You're just going to walk away, she asked, a little too loudly. Yes, Robert replied, buttoning his suit jacket. And don't worry. The exit terms are already drafted. You'll find they're very reasonable. He gave Daniel a glance. I hope you're prepared to match them. He turned to leave. And then, soft steps, quicker now, Melissa appeared from the side, heels clicking in a short rush across the marble. She reached him before he hit the doors, grabbing his wrist, her eyes blazing. Don't leave like this, she said, her voice sharp enough to cut air. She doesn't get to throw you away like trash and watch you leave in silence. Melissa, Margaret barked, scandalized. But Melissa ignored her. She turned fully to Robert, her fingers tightening. Come with me. He didn't argue. Within the hour, they were in a blacked-out Rolls-Royce, driving through the heart of the city. Neither of them spoke. She sat beside him, hands folded, back straight, burning with emotion. He broke the silence first. You didn't have to do that. I did, she said. Because she doesn't get to rewrite the story. The car pulled up to the Serenity Spa, a private, members-only place with a reputation for handling discretion like a secret society. Melissa stepped out first and barked at the staff. Clear the 3rd floor. Full VIP treatment. No interruptions. Inside, she handed him a glass of aged whiskey and kicked off her heels like it was the most natural thing in the world. You've done more for this family than any of us ever deserved. Robert took a seat on the lounge chair, sipping the drink without a word. She never cared about the little things, Melissa continued. But you remembered every detail. You knew her stomach, her sleep cycle, her moods. It was in the contract, he said simply. You made it real, she snapped. Don't act like you didn't. I saw the way you looked at her in the beginning. Robert said nothing. Melissa sighed, walking over to him. Her voice dropped to something softer. She didn't deserve that version of you. He met her eyes. And you do? She didn't flinch. I do. The words landed with force. He looked away, setting the glass down. You're still her sister. I don't care. It matters. Melissa's eyes flickered. She stepped closer, now directly in front of him. Then tell me. Do you still want her? No. Do you want me? He didn't answer. Her eyes burned, scanning him for a crack, anything she could crawl into. I'm not asking you to love me, she said, almost breathless. But don't shut me out like I'm nothing. He stood up, towering over her now. I didn't come here for this. And I didn't bring you here to watch you walk into the night alone like some discarded extra. He stepped around her. She turned, fast, just as the spa door slammed open. Security guards scrambled inside. Behind them, Margaret. And Daniel. Margaret's expression was white-hot fury wrapped in diamonds. What the hell is going on here? She screamed. Daniel looked around like a jealous boyfriend caught at a party he wasn't invited to. This where you ran off to? Melissa stepped between them and Robert instantly, shielding him without hesitation. You've had 3 years, she spat. Now it's my turn. Margaret's voice cracked. You're disgusting. Melissa grinned. So are you. But at least I'm honest about it. The tension in the spa thickened like a boiling storm. Staff froze. Security backed away. And Robert. Robert just watched it all like a man at the edge of freedom, amused by how ugly people became when they no longer had control. The storm had just begun. Daniel stepped into the spa like he owned it, like the scent of lavender oil and warm cedar belonged to him. His shirt was unbuttoned one too many times, his blazer creased from arrogance, not wear. He looked around, eyes scanning, before they landed on Melissa. He smirked. Didn't take you long to switch teams, huh? Melissa narrowed her eyes. Excuse me? You used to be just the bratty little sister sneaking drinks from the minibar. Now you're throwing yourself at your sister's husband? Or should I say ex? Before Robert could react, Melissa stepped forward, her fists clenched so tight her knuckles were white. Say that again, she growled. Daniel chuckled. Oh, I hit a nerve. Cute. You don't know a thing about me, she snapped. You think just because you're wearing overpriced cologne and a fake Rolex that you're worth anything in this room? He raised his eyebrows, offended. Fake? Yeah. I can hear it ticking from here. Margaret walked in, her heels striking the tile like bullets. Enough, both of you. Her eyes locked on Robert like she was looking at a problem she needed cleaned up. You want to go, fine. But leave with some dignity. He stared at her, silent. Margaret reached into her clutch and pulled out a crisp white envelope. 5 million. No more delays. No more drama. Just sign and disappear. She held it out like a peace offering. Or a bone tossed to a dog. Robert stepped forward. Slowly. He took the envelope. Opened it. Pulled out the check. Then looked at Daniel. Did you approve this? Daniel scoffed. That's more than enough for someone like you. Robert turned back to Margaret. He smiled, soft and slow. Then ripped the check clean down the middle. The sound sliced the silence like a sword. What are you doing? Margaret gasped. He kept tearing. 2 halves. Then 4. Then 8. Tiny pieces drifted to the spa floor like falling snow. A few even landed on Daniel's shoes. Robert stepped closer, just enough to make both of them flinch. Our contract, he said calmly, states 10 million. Cash. Plus the Azure Spire penthouse. Downtown. 34th floor. South facing. The one with the infinity pool. You remember that, Margaret? Or has Daniel been doing your numbers lately? Daniel bristled. Watch your mouth. No, Robert said flatly. You watch yours. Because if either of you thinks I'm walking away with half the price and a slap to the face, you've both mistaken me for someone else. Again. Margaret's lips trembled. For once, she had no words. Robert turned toward the door. Melissa was already standing there, holding his coat like she'd been waiting her whole life for this exact moment. Let's go, she said, her voice sharp but shaking just slightly. This place smells like betrayal. They walked out side by side. Back in the car, the silence was deafening, but charged. Melissa looked over, studying him like he was made of fire, and she didn't know if touching him would burn or save her. You tore up a $5 million check. I don't take discounts, Robert said, eyes fixed on the skyline. She smiled. Back at the penthouse, the real one, the reward, the final page of the contract, Robert stepped into a space filled with light and silence. No framed pictures. No fake decor. Just clean walls and a river view that stretched endlessly in both directions. He walked to the balcony, pulled out his phone, and took a photo. The lights of the city glowed beneath the caption he typed. New view. Accepting roommate applications. He hit post. A minute passed. Then his phone buzzed. Melissa, sending my suitcase. He stared at the screen, lips twitching into something that wasn't quite a laugh. Something better. Melissa entered Robert's office without knocking, again. She dropped onto the leather armrest of his chair, one leg crossed over the other, a crooked grin on her face, and a bag of sour candy in her hand. You're gonna love this one. Robert didn't look up from his screen. If it's about Margaret again, I doubt it. She dangled a file folder in front of his face. She made Daniel vice president. That got his attention. He turned, expression unreadable. Of what? Everything, Melissa said dramatically. Operations, hiring, finance. The man has full access. Robert blinked. Then, slowly, leaned back in his chair. Melissa threw the folder on his desk. His first official act was hiring his cousin, the one who ran that failed MLMT company, as head of HR. Then he brought in his nephew as director of purchasing. That kid dropped out of high school and thinks Excel is a kind of protein shake. Robert stared at the ceiling for a long, slow moment. Did she at least run it by the board? They're pissed, Melissa said, popping a candy in her mouth. But Margaret overrode them all. She told them Daniel has the instincts of a wartime CEO. She did air quotes with her fingers. They looked like they wanted to choke on their champagne. Robert chuckled. Let her burn it down. Melissa kicked her heels off and curled into the chair beside him. You really don't care anymore? I cared long enough. Now I'm just observing. And observe, he did. From afar, Robert watched Margaret's kingdom begin to rot at the core. Production deadlines were missed. Suppliers were swapped out for shady offshore vendors. Employees were quitting in droves, whispering stories about Daniel's outbursts, his lazy arrogance, his creepy habit of calling the intern sweetheart. Melissa showed up weekly with updates, grinning like a child reporting from the front lines. She started calling herself Agent M. She even wore sunglasses once. But the reports got darker. Ethan, she said, still using the codename sometimes, she's sick. She's always had a weak stomach, Robert said. No. I mean really sick. Melissa dropped onto his couch, face pale. Daniel tried to make her soy milk. Robert looked up. She's allergic to soy. Like EpiPen level allergic. There was silence. She took one sip and her throat started closing up, Melissa continued, voice trembling. They had to rush her to the hospital. You remember what you used to cook her? What you kept in the fridge? The labeled containers. He had nothing. She was vomiting in the car while he Googled stomach pain home remedy. Robert exhaled through his nose, slow and tired. Melissa wasn't done. Then, while she was still recovering, he gave her herbal supplements. He said they'd clean her system. She pulled out her phone and showed him a picture. First line of the label, not for use with gastrointestinal conditions. Robert rubbed his temples. She was back in the ER within 48 hours. Melissa's voice cracked. She asked him to make her the soup you used to cook. He said he threw away the pot. Called it an eyesore. She looked at Robert, something fierce behind the sadness. You saved her every time. And now she's letting that buffoon kill her with ignorance. Robert didn't reply right away. Then, slowly, he leaned back in his chair, arms crossed behind his head. It's fine, he said. Melissa blinked. What? He looked at her with a cool smile. Let him dig the grave. Melissa's laughter burst out loud, quick, and jagged. Then I'll bring the shovel. Robert smirked. Careful. That almost sounded like you enjoy this. I do enjoy this, she said, hopping off the couch. He thinks he's the wolf. But he's just a goat in a rental suit. She turned toward the door, pausing only to add, oh, and by the way, the board's calling an emergency meeting. Want me to slip you a pass? Robert raised an eyebrow. You really are my favorite spy. She winked. I'm not a spy. I'm your future roommate, remember? And with that, she disappeared down the hallway, candy in hand, high on chaos. Melissa barged into Robert's office without knocking, breathless, bangs clinging to her forehead from sweat. They're going to frame you. Robert didn't even glance up from the report he was reviewing. Who is? She marched straight to his desk and slammed her palms down. Margaret and Daniel. At the gala. It's a proposal event, but it's a setup. He's planning to expose you for leaking Luna Corp's next-gen product formula to Sterling Corporation. Now he looked up. His eyes were calm, unbothered. Perfect. Melissa blinked. I just told you they're going to ruin your life on a live stream in front of the country. Robert stood slowly, walked to the window, and dialed a number. Let me handle it. She crossed her arms. You better. The call connected. Who is this? Came the deep voice on the other end. Robert Hayes, he said simply. Apex Media Group. There was a pause. Then, Mr. Hayes. I've heard of you. I'll make it quick, Robert said. Daniel Vance is planning to use you as leverage. But I'm offering something better. Go on. 1 week. National campaign. My creators push your flagship product. Free of charge. Silence again. Then a quiet exhale. Your terms? I want everything. Call logs. Screenshots. Meeting recordings. And I want you to play dumb at the gala. You'll have the files within the hour. Robert smiled, then hung up. Melissa looked both impressed and horrified. You scare me sometimes. He looked over. Good. The gala arrived 3 days later. It was live-streamed across 5 platforms, attended by industry giants, political figures, influencers, and shareholders. Every guest walked the red carpet like it was a fashion show. Champagne flowed like water. The music was soft and opulent. Camera drones hovered above the velvet aisles. Margaret wore white. A dress tailored like royalty. Her hair was pinned into a perfect bun, her diamond necklace the size of a toddler's fist. Beside her stood Daniel. Confident. Grinning. Pretending this was his world. Then Robert arrived. Dark tailored suit. Clean lines. Nothing flashy. He didn't come with a date. He came with a tote bag. Whispers followed him like perfume. Margaret stiffened when she saw him. Daniel narrowed his eyes but kept his cool. Robert nodded at the doorman and entered like he owned the venue. A few of Margaret's distant relatives hissed at him. Get out. You're not welcome here. One aunt even shouted, "You're pathetic. Still chasing her after all this?" Robert didn't respond. He walked to the refreshment table and poured himself a glass of apple juice. Nonchalant. The lights dimmed. The MC took the stage. "Tonight, we witness love reborn." Daniel walked up slowly, microphone in one hand, velvet box in the other. He dropped to one knee with theatrical flair, lifting the diamond ring toward Margaret. "I lost you once," he said with false tears. "I won't lose you again. Marry me." Margaret covered her mouth. The crowd swooned. She nodded. Applause. But Daniel didn't stand. Instead, his face twisted into sorrow. "I wanted this to be perfect. But something's ruined it." He stood slowly, dramatically. "Ladies and gentlemen, I hate to do this, but the truth must come first. We've been betrayed." The crowd gasped. Robert took a slow sip of juice. Daniel turned to the cameras. "Robert Hayes. He sold Luna Corp's most valuable formula to Sterling Corporation." Margaret looked stricken. The audience turned. Robert stepped forward slowly, reached into his tote bag, and pulled out a bullhorn. He flipped it on. "Ladies and gentlemen, use your brains." The sound was absurd. Childish. Powerful. Everyone froze. Robert stepped onto an empty chair, bullhorn in hand. "Let's walk through this. I've been divorced for 2 years. No access. No passwords. No clearance. But suddenly, I leaked trade secrets? At this event? To ruin a marriage proposal?" He aimed the bullhorn at Margaret. "Miss Thompson, shouldn't you be asking why your fiancé was the one who found out about the leak before your board did?" A beat. The ballroom doors burst open. "Police! Nobody move!" A dozen officers stormed the stage. Daniel's face lit up. "Arrest him! That's the traitor!" But the officers ignored Robert entirely. They walked right past him. Cuffed Daniel. "Daniel Vance, you're under arrest for theft and distribution of corporate trade secrets." Click. The cuffs snapped shut. "What? No. You've got it wrong. This is a setup," he screamed. A projector flared to life behind Robert. Displayed for all to see, chat logs between Daniel and Sterling Corporation audio files. The product formula attachment. Dates. IP addresses. Daniel crumpled. Margaret collapsed into a chair, pale and shaking. Robert stepped off the chair and back onto the floor. His voice dropped to a normal tone. "I wasn't the traitor. I was the witness." He turned to the press cameras. "I was also the husband." A new slide appeared behind him. The marriage contract. 3 years. Legal agreement. Emotional shield. Support clauses. Bullet points appeared. 18 emergency hospital runs. 460 home-cooked meals. 73 family events attended. 0 real thank yous. Photos appeared next. Him holding her hair while she was sick. Him standing in the rain during photo ops. Him at her bedside while she slept. The comments section of the livestream exploded. Queen of misjudgment. From CEO to clown. She traded loyalty for a liar. Robert looked straight at Margaret. She stood shakily and took a step toward him. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know. I was wrong." He didn't speak. She took another step. "Please. Marry me again. I'll give you everything. Half my company. All of it." He walked toward her. Leaned in. Whispered. "You're not worthy." The room fell into silence. Margaret's hands trembled. Robert turned and walked away, Melissa waiting by the door. The cameras followed him, not her. Because the real story wasn't about a wedding. It was about the man who walked in with nothing, and left with everything. The morning after the gala, Robert didn't bother checking the news. He didn't have to. It was everywhere. CEO loses national treasure husband in viral divorce bombshell. Margaret Thompson's billion-dollar mistake. From contract groom to corporate king, the rise of Robert Hayes. Hashtag You're Not Worthy trends worldwide after savage gala mic drop. The clips were everywhere. The bullhorn. The arrest. The phrase. The pause before Robert said it, like a director setting up the final frame before the credits rolled. Even his tote bag had its own fanbase now. Apex Media's servers crashed from the traffic surge. Recruitment requests poured in by the thousands. Every content creator, brand, and ad agency wanted a piece of the man who had calmly dismantled a corporate empire with a smile and a microphone. The stock price tripled in 2 weeks. Robert gave 0 interviews. But Melissa? She was everywhere behind the scenes, curling up in the corner of his office, feeding him ramen between back-to-back investor calls, tossing gossip like popcorn between pitch decks. Margaret tried to call me last night, she said one afternoon, legs folded on the edge of his desk. I blocked her. Robert raised an eyebrow. You answered first? No, she said. I just wanted to know how many rings it took before she realized I wasn't going to pick up. He smirked. Cruel. Learned from the best. They didn't talk about feelings. Not directly. But every time she fell asleep on the couch in his office, Robert made sure her blanket was pulled up. Every time he stepped out for coffee, he brought her one too, even though she liked hers ice-cold and syrupy sweet. Months passed. And then, one crisp spring morning, they stood outside the courthouse again, this time without an audience. No press. No photographers. Just 2 signatures and a printed certificate between them. Robert held the paper between his fingers like it might dissolve if he squeezed too hard. Melissa beamed, bouncing on her toes like a fox who'd just stolen a basket of jewels. You're stuck with me now. Terrifying. She reached up and kissed his cheek. Sealed with love. He laughed, genuinely. The kind of laugh he hadn't made since before Margaret. Since before the contract. Inside the clerk's office, the walls were beige and boring, the chairs squeaky, and the pens tied to strings. But as he looked down at their names printed together, a flicker of memory came unbidden. Flashback. Late nights in the mansion's kitchen, when Melissa still wore eyeliner like armor and carried rebellion like a badge. She would sneak in smelling of cigarettes and vodka, slumped against the counter while he made tea. You can't save me, she'd muttered once. I'm not trying, he'd said. I'm just making tea. But he did save her. In his own quiet way. No lectures. Just patience. Just consistency. Just existing as proof that calm didn't mean weak, and control didn't mean cold. Back to the present. Melissa leaned against him as they left the courthouse, her fingers wrapped around his. I always knew it had to be you, she murmured. Even if I had to lock you in my basement to keep you. He looked down at her, amused. I believe you. She gave him a devilish grin. Still might, if you ever look at someone else. Robert chuckled. You're everything your sister wasn't. Don't compare me to her, she said. It's an insult. They spent the afternoon in silence, curled up on the massive sectional in their penthouse. Melissa painted her nails blood red while Robert read through a distribution deal. She kept glancing at him. He noticed. What? You know what would really piss her off? He didn't even blink. We're not posting a wedding pic. No, she said. Better. They visited the Thompson estate on a Sunday. Melissa's idea. Robert didn't wear a tie. He didn't wear a watch. He showed up in a simple black shirt and dark trousers, the picture of untouchable class. Margaret was in the drawing room. She hadn't been expecting them. Her eyes snapped to Robert first, then to the hand Melissa had wrapped tightly around his. You, she said, her voice flat. Melissa ignored her completely. Instead, she leaned in, turned to Robert, and, without hesitation, kissed him. Not a polite peck. Not performative. A slow, possessive kiss, in the center of the room, with full eye contact the moment it ended. Margaret's face cracked. You shameless little. Melissa's voice sliced in, sweet as venom. That's Mrs. Robert Hayes to you now. Robert said nothing. He didn't need to. Margaret's silence was its own funeral. They left without another word. And as the doors closed behind them, Robert whispered, "Closure?" Melissa grinned. "No." She laced her fingers through his. "Payback."